Good morning and very warm welcome to this first seminar in the pedagogy seminar series of Parimal and Pramod Chaudhary Center for Learning and Teaching. As I think faculty members are already aware of this center, there are students are coming for the first time to attend a program for the center. So let me briefly introduce about aims of this center. This center has been recently established in IIT Bombay with the aim of promoting good pedagogical practices and training both faculty and also students on variety of aspects of teaching and learning. So we are going to have, broadly we are going to have activities centered at faculty, new faculty who are coming to IIT system, sensitizing them about different methods of teaching, best teaching practices and so on. We also intend to hold TA training programs every semester, and we also have planned to start aspiring faculty training programs for graduating PhD and postdocs. So these will be certification programs where will be run probably through a semester where you complete certain number of modules on teaching, learning, and even how to write proposals, how to become a faculty member in an academic institute in India. So this will be a certification course that will be starting probably next semester, mid next semester and so on. In addition to that, we are going to have multiple student-centric activities. Two of the fronts on which we are thinking are helping students improve their writing skills, particularly PhD students. There is a lot of problem with report writing, paper writing, thesis writing, and we are trying to explore possibilities of helping them with writing skills. And the second thing that we find problematic at both undergraduate and postgraduate level is mathematics. Improving, helping or doing activities that will help increase ability to use mathematics effectively in their profession. So these are some of the things that we have planned in the beginning. However, this center I am hoping that would turn out to be a platform for trying variety of ideas in education technology, education science, and different practices. So with this brief background about the center, a very warm welcome to this workshop. Professor Subrata Roy from IIT Mandi has kindly agreed to hold this workshop today on learning styles and teaching in engineering education. He has vast experience of teaching over the last 40 years. I would request Professor Gururajan to introduce him and start the workshop.
Good morning. I'm very happy to introduce Professor Ray formally. My interactions with him have been very few, but it had always been about teaching and research and practices and the kind of problems that we face and how we deal with them and how better we can deal with them and things like that. So when he was planning to visit, I thought it will be a good idea to have him meet with all of us and have some of these discussions. And from his very early days, so he's from a metallurgy department but did PhD with somebody from physics, so he always had a different perspective than rest of us. And he has worked both abroad and in India and in research organizations and in universities. So he spent most of his professional life teaching at Roorkee, I think 33 years or so. And then he is currently with IIT Mandi, both taking care of administrative aspects and also had been teaching for a while. So I'm very happy to have him with us here. And the sessions are organized in such a way that he's going to have two small sessions. So he's going to introduce sort of the topics for discussion, because teaching and learning can be very broad, wide, and so he's going to sort of put the outline within which we will have discussions. So, he will first have a session, then it will be open for discussion, and then we will have a break, we will come back, and then he is also going to have a sort of summary session or wrap up session of all the discussions. So, I request Professor Ray to take over, and we are very happy to have you here, sir.
You know, one problem with the teachers, they always like to speak. In fact, yesterday I planned a 1 hour lecture which went to 1.5 hours. So I don't want that to happen here. So I have got few slides, and I am going to divide this in two segments. In the first segment, I am going to discuss a concept. We are going to truly discuss. I am going to, the slides will present the concept, and we will discuss and try to assimilate those concepts. And then after that, in the second session, we will apply those concepts to teaching in engineering, so engineering education. So that's how I have divided. Now let me tell you one thing, that how I came into this kind of an area. When I was teaching, I didn't have any time to read about teaching, as the situation with all the teachers. You know, we had a textbook, we follow the textbook, supplement it with other textbooks, and go and present it, and no time to know what other people are thinking about education and teaching. We have got to do research, we have got to do administration. So when I got freedom from this, I thought that I have done a great injustice to teaching. So let me try to now study what injustice I have done. And that was my beginning point. And secondly, I thought, now I will talk also about what my findings are, and talk to the people who are potentially becoming teachers or who are presently teachers, so that they don't have time to study, but they can get a framework to give some depth to their teaching. What I mean by depth is why we are teaching. We want that more students to learn. Student is the centerpiece. So we have to teach the students. But normally, now we teach, we don't consider the students. Our teaching method, our teaching style is independent of students. So that aspect that I am going to bring in. You know, while going into it, the first concept I became familiar, it was introduced by a person called Carl Jung. Carl Jung is as old as Freud, his contemporary, but Freud is extremely well known. Carl Jung, his contribution is considered as fundamental, but he is not so well known amongst common people. So, in fact, I didn't know much about Carl Jung, only I started reading after I. And then what was his concept? His concept was that every individual has got a learning style. That's his basic concept. You know, what is learning? Learning generally is, we make it a part of the cognitive skills. Okay? And there are several understanding about learning. Let me now come to my first slide. Okay. The first point I told that there is a thing called cognitive skills. These are core skills the brain uses to think, read, learn, remember, reason, and pay attention. Working together, the cognitive skills, they take incoming information and move it into the bank of knowledge for use every day at study, at work, and in life. This is the cognitive skill. Carl Jung in 1923, he said there is a concept that is the learning style. Now, this learning style, what he told that every individual has a learning style. Now, this learning style has got, how he defined it is, right, he told that this learning style is rooted in perception and judgment. Judgment means the decision making process, that is what he called judgment. All conscious mental activity occurs in two perception processes. So, he told the perception process has got two, this is a dimension we call it, the dimension of perception has got two bipolar states. One is sensing, another is intuition. Some people are sensing, some people are intuition. Sensing means who take in information through all the sensory organ, you know. So, you know, it means essentially that they are more realistic. They try to absorb the reality as it exists. And intuition are people, they of course, they see a thing in the reality and then they make this reality abstract in his mind. It is an abstract reality they work with. So, these are the two ways. Some people love to work with reality as such, some people love to work with the concept of reality in his mind. These are the two kind of extreme bipolar situation that he said. Then he said that after that he has to take a decision, and that decision is made by the two judgment processes, one by thinking, that means you know, they make step by step the way we take rational decision, that is what, you know, we do from the on the basis of perception, we make rational decision through steps. And the other type is, they do not bother about they take kind of an, in a very global way, they make an intuitive kind of a decision. This is being explained here. The sensing see the world through their senses, as I told, they observe what is real, factual, actually happening, and though perceived through intuition, they live in the abstract dimensions of reality. And in judgment, thinking, when they reach decision, the thinking type of people, they reach decision in a logical way, and feeling type of people, they approach decision through a subjective, perceptive, empathetic and emotional perspective. So, he told there are 4 types of persons according to their learning type. So, they told ST, S is sensing, T is thinking. So, sensing thinking, then sensing feeling, then intuition thinking, intuition feeling. He told that individual learning styles have what people can be classified, you are this type, you are this type, you are this type. Then Jung filled what this type means. Each type means I only learn through that kind of an A, or I can do also the, if I am an ST type, that means I will learn only through ST. I will learn, I will make perception through sensing, I will take decision through thinking. You don't know, it is not like that. This is a preferred style. I feel very convenient on that. And then, so generally everyone uses both kinds of perception processes and both kinds of judgment processes, but we each tend to be more comfortable and skilled in one type of perception and judgment than another. Okay. Then Jung introduced another dimension, and this depends on attitude, you know, that how you interact with outside, the personal attitude of enjoying. Either some people uses human interaction and some people uses they are actually extrovert, and some people they learn from the through internal reflection, they are introvert kind of people. So, this is another dimension he added. So, with these 4 types, now it becomes 4 with extrovert, 4 with introvert. This is what Jung proposed. It is long back, 23. But after that, particularly from 50s, the educationists started extending this concept. Now, one thing let me tell you, any point you want to feel that things are not clear, just stop me and let us discuss. Okay. So, it is not a lecture. So, next I am taking that the nature of learning style, what actually learning style, this concept, what is the nature of it? There are wide kind of in sociology, although in or in social sciences, people have got lot of divergence in thinking. So I wanted to give an idea that what others thought, what is the nature. Now, some people believe that they believe that cognitive and learning styles are constitutionally fixed. Jung told that we can go from one to the other style. It's a flexible. But then some people developed, they don't know, no, it's fixed. And why it is fixed? Because there are three possible reasons, and the reasons are, they told this has developed because genetically influenced personality traits, because of that it is fixed. There is dominance of a particular sensory or perceptual channels. That's why that's also one's own characteristics, and it depends on dominance of certain functions linked to the left and right halves of the brain. Left and right brain. Left brain, our speech kind of capability and is there, and right brain has got the spatial capability. So if somebody has got is easy with left brain, so he would like to listen to lectures, talk like us. So because of these three reasons, he told this is constitutionally fixed, you can't change it. But then there are others, they told that this is okay, this is biologically somewhat determined, but it is also developmentally imposed. He told it also depends on what kind of school education method he has gone through or early education method he has gone through. So his learning style is also conditioned by that. So they told that, but they told still, once it has developed, then it becomes more or less fixed. After that, you cannot change. So when it comes to higher education, they told we can't do much to it. Then there is another type of people, they told this is a relatively stable cognitive style, but could be modified by teacher. They told we can modify it, the learning styles. Then they told with strategies and processes, design of the curriculum, assessment and the ethos of the course and institution. So this is a kind of, this group of researchers, they told no, you can change it and teachers can change it. And but actually, although they told it's biologically generated, there has been no study on learning styles, its biological root. Generally, they should have studied the identical and non-identical twins and would have studied these aspects and would have seen that how much biology influences it. And external factors, particularly immediate environment, influences the development of cognitive skill. This is known, and abilities. Learning styles result from dynamic interplay of self and experience. And however, the preferences identified should be worked with rather than changed. They told don't try to change it altogether, work it, make it a little deviation here and there, fine, so the student gets more used to a different learning style. So as a result, Carl Jung proposed his model, subsequently a host of models came. And this is just, I will briefly go. There are a class of models who told that this is constitutionally based and learning styles are fixed. So this is one kind of model. Another kind of model is, they told that learning style is linked to particular personality features, and so these are. The third is, they told personality type is stable. And the fourth kind is, they told they are flexibly stable. You get a correlation about learning styles. Say, for example, if my learning style is investigated today and after 6 years, they might have changed, but there is correlation. That's what is meant by flexible is stable learning style. Then another type of model came. They told, okay, people have learning styles, but the students develop strategies and approach for learning. So they have got that kind of model. They, based on learning styles, they develop approaches and strategies to learn something, to learn a curriculum and all that. So this will become more apparent when I go a little later into models. One model, there are a large number of models. A few models of significance are taken up. The Gregor model, 4-channel learning style. Here, Jung said the perception, and then the other was judgment. Then he had perception, and then in place of judgment he told it's the ordering. This is important. And perception he described by two poles are concrete and abstract, and for ordering they have got two poles, sequential and random. So Gregor developed 4 styles. The concrete sequential, we denote them by CS, concrete sequential learner. They are ordered, perfection oriented, practical and thorough. The abstract sequential learner, AS, they are logical, analytical, rational and evaluative. The abstract random learner, they are sensitive, colorful, emotional and spontaneous. The concrete random learner, intuitive, independent, impulsive and original. What I should explain a little bit, what I mean by ordering the sequential and random. Some people, they learn things through sequences, one step, then the evolution of that concept in the next, in the third and like that. This is one kind of a learner. Another kind of a learner, they don't like that sequential style. They generally, you'll find that they try to think more globally. And his concept evaluation does not go step by step. Suddenly, it takes a qualitative transformation. Okay, so these are the kinds of learner. They have got their advantages and sequence have got their advantages, which I will explain later. Now, what they told, there are inborn inclinations towards one or two of them. He told not that you can be one kind of a learner. You can have an auxiliary learning, which also you are fairly convenient. Not maybe you are not as convenient with your primary learning style. You can have 2 learning styles also. So this is the kind of concept which Gregor said, and then how? Yeah, sure.
So the education system that we have, particularly school education, does it try to enforce one of them more than the other? For example, do we try to enforce everyone into the first ordered?
You cannot. You see, let me go. You have made a very interesting point. Let me try to tell you. You see, if you see the ancient method of education in India, the ashram style, there this learned the teacher teaching individually to the student. They can take care of his learning preferences or evolve it individually. But here we are, in the mass education system. We have got a class with different kinds of learning styles. So what should be the teacher strategy, which I will come in the second segment. I am now trying to see that how to understand your student and his learning preferences. Then you will be able to respond, how you are able to respond. There is also another aspect that teacher also has its learning preference. After all, teacher also, Jung told that these are for individuals. He didn't develop a theory for education or anything. He told these are individual tendencies. So teacher also falls into one of the categories. And what has been observed that the teaching style is quite a bit influenced by the what type of teacher is, what kind of learning style he has got. So these are we will deal with these questions in the second half, where now I am trying to impress that there are different kinds of models exist, and there are now how to taste this model. The model people will have different kind of model, how to taste it, they are right. So I will not give details of test. I will tell that how Gregor model they tested. They give 10-item self-report questionnaire in which a respondent orders 4 words in each item. So there are 10 items, and from the, say, an example is he will be given perfectionist, research, colorful, and risk taker. You know, these are characteristics of the 4 categories. So students, or if I am a teacher, you want to identify what my learning style is. So I will be asked that what describes you. So I will lay it, what most describes you, what least describes you, I will order it, kind of thing. There are 10 such questions, and from there what they try to study, they have studied 110 adults, and they completed the test twice at intervals ranging in time from 6 or to 8 weeks, and Gregor obtained a reliability or alpha coefficient. Alpha coefficient is, you know, there are 10 questions, and all the evaluations of this, they are got together in a composite evaluation mark. And so the alpha A is essentially the variance in y, summation over that, and the variance in x. This is the k is the number of dimension or the number of bipolar variables that are there. So this, what he found, that this varies from 0.85 to 0.88. What he tells, that how justified are these concepts, how reliable are these concepts, do they work really in characterizing the learning style. But the interesting part in social science, you know, is that when somebody else evaluated the alpha coefficient, he found this fellow found 0.85 to 0.8, this fellow found 0.23 to 0.66. So this kind of things happen, you know, but, and that's why, you know, please.
Are these models also supposed to represent people with disabilities, or they are treated as outliers?
No, disabilities means this is essentially, if they have got physical disability, this of course does not matter, but mental disabilities, no, they are not, they are outliers, they are not in the model. Then another thing they studied, what they studied is, you know, the correlation. Suppose I take the 2 tests today, and I take the 2 tests after 6 months, what is the correlation between these 2 outcomes? So this is another parameter. He found that these are coming, alpha is coming, sorry, what happened? So alpha is coming between 0.89 and 93, which came by others 0.23 to 0.66, but the correlation they are getting 0.85 to 0.88. I quoted this as alpha, that's not right. So that means, and then when others, another fellow evaluated it, O'Brien, he evaluated it for each type of a learning style. He found the alpha for CS type of people has got alpha 0.64, AS type 0.51, AR is 0.61, CR is 0.63.
The alpha correlation presumes that people themselves know how to categorize themselves accurately and then respond accordingly. I mean,
You see,
this itself is not very, very
no,
clear
no, no,
to
no.
begin with. So
You
when
see,
say CS, AS, AR, and then you try to correlate, I think there could be a fair amount of confusion.
No,
with the
what I
kind
am
of
trying to,
respondent.
no, I have understood your question. You know what happens, the person I am, I don't know what learning style I have got. Now through these questions, my learning style is getting determined. Now this of course depends on my evaluation of what I like. So naturally in this kind of social science research, you won't get, say, very high correlation and all that. So that you have to live with it in social science research. They are quite distinct from the scientific research. They are different. So you have to live with it.
But I have a similar question. That in this questionnaire, are people being asked other abstract questions from which it is being reduced to which category they are, or they are actually being asked to categorize?
You see what happens, the 4 options are given, and which they, which suppose I am taking the test, I will be asked which describe me most and which describe it me less. So rank it according to that. Okay.
So you are asked to describe your own learning.
Your own learning, what how nobody, others are not finding it. I am doing it, and they carried it out amongst 110 people, and these, whatever the results they got, it's based on that. Yeah.
You mentioned that a typical human being is a mix of all these. So while I might feel that I am predominantly, say, AS, and how much I am others, I may not know. Maybe I am equally for the other things.
So in that case, you will rank, say for example, you may say that the 4 words are given, the 2 words in 2 categories you will find they equally describe you. They will say I am equally convenient, both these equally describes me, the other are less, like that. So they will rank it, generally they give 4 for most, and like that they have a marking system. Through that they find out the whole criteria. Despite serious question on consistency, there was something they found, that there was strong support for ordering dimension. They found that the other dimension is not so much clearly supported by their finding, but for ordering they found this is a very concrete kind of, they are coming out very strongly. What they are telling, they found that sequential processor, that is CS and AS category, they tend to be adapters who use conventional procedures to solve problems. Okay. Whereas the random processors tending to be innovators who approach problems from novel perspective. These 2 things came out very clearly from their study, that these are valid dimensions. About others, it's a little diffuse kind of thing. Then, there are other people who study, it's within the Gregor kind of model, they use 5 different measures of cognitive style, and they examined 165 university students and staff members with an average of 32. 3 factors they identified. They told that generally the convergent and objective at one pole were the AS kind of thinkers, and divergent and subjective who are AR kind of thinkers. And also clear cut that data processing orientation, they are immediate, accurately and applicable at one pole CS, and concerned with patterns and possibilities at the other CS. So what they found, that these about convergent and objective kind of an thinking, they clearly come out, and divergent and subjective, these 2 extremes come out very clearly, and data processing orientation also in these 2 poles, they also come out very clearly. Then they found the introversion and extroversion, they are correlated to the measures of AS minus AR and CS minus CR. That's their study told. So they are examining that how valid this criteria are. They have been proposed now with their, what should I say, with some kind of their assessment. But then how valid really this concept. Now what are the pedagogical implications of this model? The pedagogical implications claimed by Gregor, the strong correlation exists between the individual's disposition, the media and teaching strategies. That's what he concluded.
So just one comment about the first point that you made. Just one comment about the first point that you have made. I think one challenge that we face, particularly teaching postgraduate students, is to changing them from adapters to innovators. Their style might be innovator style, but it has been suppressed in school and undergraduate education. They have been made to follow, the sequential processing.
Yeah, our teaching is sequential.
And the problem is that they are made to believe that that is the right way.
No, fine.
So
but generally you will find certain students, they're very uncomfortable with sequential kind of
Yes,
thinking.
yes.
You'll find they're coming to class, they're not interested in this sequential, and they almost learn nothing up to a point. Then suddenly you'll find and they have got a picture. It almost comes to some kind of global thinking emerges in them. So this is they learn generally by fits and bounds kind of thing. So those kind of people you can identify in the class. If you ask them initially anything, you have done 2-3 classes, they have not absorbed anything at all. So this kind of learners are there. But those kind of people, they are very good in correlated in a broad picture. They develop always a global picture. The sequential learner, they are good for a task. They know all the things that are necessary in a task. But if they have to innovate, taking care of a global perspective, that the other kind of a learner is required. So that I will, in the second part, I will go into those kinds of implications. What they observed, individuals with clear-cut dispositions towards concrete and sequential style chose approaches such as dito sheets, workbooks, computer-assisted instruction, and kits. Individuals with strong abstract and random dispositions opted for television, movies, and group discussions. Individuals with dominant abstract and sequential learning preferred lectures, audio tapes, and extensive reading assignments. Those with concrete and random disposition were drawn to independent study, games, and simulations. Individuals who demonstrated strength in multiple disposition selected multiple forms of media and classroom approaches. But one thing which is very interesting, when the study was conducted, irrespective of what is the style, the student told that, we don't like the same style being followed. We like that you go on changing the style because otherwise we get bored. So to bring them out of the boredom, they want their teachers to mix the styles of teaching. Okay, this is an interesting thing what was observed. Teachers who understand their own styles, one learning styles, and those of their learners can reduce the harm they may otherwise do and develop a repertory of authentic skill. Now, this model, Gregor model, they believe that the learning style is more or less of an individual is extremely important, and we must respond to that. And if you are not aware of the learning style, then you can, create distress in the student. Some of the researchers in the group called Rita Dunn, she believes that even the extreme cases, the student may get sick. And if teacher tries to follow what is not natural for him or her, the teacher also will get sick. So these are all kinds of concepts that they are. Gregor argued against attempts to force teachers and learners to change their natural styles, believing that this does more harm than good and can alienate people or make them ill. Okay, that's right. Then they did some studies, Sweden and England, in liberal arts college with a subsample of 64 out of 100 students, showing a clear preference for a single cognitive style, a sequential processing preference, is associated with a preference for structured learning, which we do mostly, structured assessment activities, and independent laboratory work. There was a clear tendency for science majors to be sequential processors. Out of 22, 19 were sequential processors, and for humanities major, they were more random processors. They were 17 out of 20. While social sciences majors were more evenly balanced, 11. Random processing students preferred group discussion and projects and assessment based on performance and presentation.
This kind of evaluation cannot be done on school children because they won't even know what you mean by perfectionist and.
You see, the evaluation is being done who is studying. They are only asked questions. That's
No,
all.
but in schools, for example, if you ask are you a perfectionist or research oriented or colorful, they might not even understand what these words mean.
So
their
these are
question
for
is
higher education.
higher education.
You have to suitably question then what they can understand. and
But has it been done on school children?
yeah, large number of studies on school children are there, which of course I am biased towards higher education. So,
So if I may just add, I don't think anybody asks the students or anybody who is filling the questionnaire to which category you belong to.
no.
I mean, if you typically look at any magazine or newspaper, you have these kind of questionnaires where people ask to choose, how do you answer this question? Do you choose A, B, or C? Then few A's, then you are categorized as a perfectionist. So it's more of an outcome of a social experiment that is done rather than them having to actually tell.
No, this is a Reader's Digest type of question,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
it's simply
But what I'm saying is, at least
Yeah.
one of the questions that I saw was maybe pitched for college students because it asked them to rank
Right.
in terms of what type of person you are.
Yes.
And it said abstract research.
Right. That's for, these are all
Yeah.
studies
So
at the
this is
college.
something like in our feedback where the students are asked, do you think you are the category of student who believes, where do you stand? And then this is used to correlate later on.
Sure.
In this kind of study, what happens is if you give a test to somebody once, if you give it again, the test might have also influenced.
True. True.
The sense
You see, not only that, what they have done,
and the
one
word-
way.
and the word you use for describing may have some values loaded in society.
Sure.
If you use an alternative thesaurus word, maybe people will, because many of these words are value loaded in society.
Sure.
In social science, this is the problem. The word that you use, you say creative if you use, you know a particular. Or you may use an alternate word, people may not call themselves that, and so on. So this danger is also there, especially in that effect of test on the person itself. Next time you take the test, the person is a changed person.
You see,
Because of the test, not because of some additional learning.
see, if you see these dimensions,
Take the retake the
One of those fellows, and in another test maybe.
no, if you know that these dimensions, why social science have got so many theories which are valid, because these dimensions are not, if you say as a scientist, they are not very accurate and leading to the unique result. But then, still you are able to find some facts. That's right.
Just one small worry. Whom are you targeting as an ideal learner? Is there a learner? Is there a motivation? All these things, do you have at the back of the mind and you are addressing those?
No,
What is it?
I'll tell you in the second part that we have essentially the whole is you will have in your class a mix of different kind of learners, and for engineering the different kinds of learners are all useful for engineering, and they can perform, certain people can perform certain tasks, certain people can perform certain tasks.
That's right.
Say in engineering,
That's
you need designer, modelers, one type of people can do that better. You need the implementation people in the field, another type of learner can do that better. So that I will come to the second day. So we are not aiming, it's not that, the aim is not to identify one type of learner and do education for him. I have to teach everybody.
So effectively, you are going to have a generalized way of teaching, but then it has to cater to all these individual.
Right.
That is where the.
That is where the,
lot more,
right.
lot more complex.
The premise that we teach in one way,
Yeah.
and that one way may be best for only one type of learner.
The point is taken. That point is
And
taken.
for the instructor,
That point is taken. But then the question is, it puts a tremendous amount of foresight into the teacher, that he is actually catering to all of these.
Right.
And then he has to bring out all of these aspects.
But
So
if
then
you saw the
there can be
methodology-
no one single method which will get you.
So it includes videos, it includes simulation,
okay.
it includes data. So I mean that at least it should be easy to implement in a in a course, right? I mean, you can have different components and apparently using
Sir, you are again going to combine this with one type of learner actually wanting all these inputs.
No, everybody
No,
wants
no,
all
no,
these
not
things.
all.
No, one, let me tell you what the objective is. A teacher is not, he finds a perfect strategy for his course and does it. No. A teacher starts, he has to be what this is supposed to do, give you a framework of thinking to become more and more effective, to devising various strategies as you are giving a course this year, next year, like that. That's the objective. The objective is, there is nothing called a perfect strategy when you have got such a mix of students. So that's it. Okay. Then Drysdale, they did a 4-year study with more than 800 University of Calgary students. They found working with computers requires sequential thinking. It was found that the dominant sequential processing group, that is CAS and AS, did best in the computer science, and the AR group did worst. The differences were substantial in an introductory computer science course with an effect size of 0.85 between the highest and lowest performing groups, equivalent to a mean advantage of 29 percentile points. Statistically significant stylistic differences in grade point averages were found in 11 subject areas, with the largest effects appearing in art, the only subject where CS students did well, then kinesiology, that is scientific study of human or non-human body movement, statistics, computer science, engineering, and mathematics. In 7 subjects, all of them scientific, technological, or mathematical, the best academic scores were obtained by CS learners, with the exception of medical science and kinesiology, where AS learner had a clear advantage. So this kind of pedagogical implication they could see exists. Then I am going to another model. This is called stable learning style model. This is also quite talked about and one of the popular models. Gregor model is a very popular model. This fellow was a teacher and he proposed this model, and he went in USA, he went into business, and government used his models. He sold his model to the government for different purposes. It was a very popular model. Myers-Briggs model also, it's a very similar to this, a development over the Carl Jung concept. So here he used 4 dimension, extroversion, introversion, which Carl Jung said, sensing, intuition, Carl Jung, thinking, feelings are Carl Jung. Then there is another dimension he added, judging and perceiving. Each 4-letter type of that represents a complex set of relationships among the functions. These are called these S, N, T, F, S sensing, T thinking, S, N intuition, and feeling. For these 2 variables, these are called functions. And then E and I, extroversion and introversion, is called attitude. And attitude towards the outer world is J and P, whether somebody is judgmental, whether somebody is perceptive, so that variable. So they introduced that and found these 60 categories of learning types. And they found what is the characteristics of that. Summary of the 10 most important MBTI types. So this is a study. There are lots of, they also studied the pedagogical implication, how sound these variables are. But I just, in social science, you have got number of models. So I can't go on telling, but I just wanted to say that what are the variables, that's what I want to draw. I want to draw your attention, because you know what are the kinds of bipolar dimensions they are judging it by. Then there are who believe that they are flexible stable model, that they are stable. If you study my learning style today, and if you study it after 10 years, you will find that it has changed, but both are correlated, you will find. This is what is the characteristic of flexibly style models. Here, they got 2 dimensions. I don't know if you are able to see. These are called concrete experience and abstract conceptualization. This is CE and AC. This is one dimension, and another dimension is active experimentation and reflective observation. So these are the 2 dimensions over which they had the 4 quadrant, and they classified people in terms of the forms of knowing. This is also a popular model, this is called Kolb's model, and they found that there are 4 forms of knowing: divergence, those which are, this is they call type 2, who are concrete and reflective, that is concrete in their experiences and reflective in their thinking, or reflective in their observation, achieved by reliance. Then there is type 3, who are abstract and reflective, abstract in their conceptualization, and reflective means they do their thinking and assimilate that by that process. Then there are convergence, type 1, who are abstract active, and accommodation, there are type 4, who are concrete and active. They also assessed these individuals' preferred modes of learning. These are AC, CE, AE, RO. These are the 4 type A. That whether people they are doing or thinking, and conceptualization, abstract or through experiment. So these are the 2 types. So they found that their test was there were to complete 12 sentences that describe the learning. Each sentence I learned the best from, and has 4 endings, which are AC, rational theory; CE, personal relationship; AE, a chance to try out and practice; RO, observation. So there were 12 such sentences and 4 alternatives, and through that they were evaluating. And they will give 4 marks if it is most like you, and 1 mark which is least like you. In that they will give the marking, and they have done this kind of to find out that where the fellow lies in these 4 quadrants, and what kind of forms of knowing he has got. This is essentially the Kolb's theory. Then the most interesting is learning strategies and strategies. This is a fellow called Entwistle and another fellow, these 2. What they told, okay, learning style, whatever is there. But when a student comes to a curriculum or a course, he develops his own strategies. That's important. They told, what are the strategies? They evolve a deep approach, surface approach, and strategic approach. The deep approach is in that the intention is to understand ideas for yourself. Surface approach, the intention is to cope with the course requirements, and the strategic approach, intention is to achieve the highest possible grade. So these are the approaches, the characteristics of the approaches. That's what is important in learning. What kind of strategy they undertake, that's also important. So these are the different kinds of theories that are there. So now this is the end of the first segment. What are the open questions on learning style? The status of learning style, is it inherited genetically? Is it an artifact of functioning of brain, or is it shaped in early education in schools, or a combination of them? 2, is learning style of an individual unchangeable and makes a person sick when subjected to a different style of learning environment, or merely it's a preferred one and one could evolve to a different style or a range of styles? These are the 2 questions about the learning status of learning style. About the dimensions, people have identified different dimensions. Jung has identified perception and judgment, Gregor perception and ordering, Meyer and Briggs personality traits, perception, judgment, decision. These 4 dimensions: Kolb, concrete experience, abstract conceptualization, active experimentation and reflective observation, 2 4 knowing types. Whether style is a broader characteristic of students in the strategy approach, preferred way of tackling learning tasks, this is the characteristics of the style. But what is also important is the strategy that the students evolve, is the way that a student chooses to tackle a specific task in the light of its perceived demands. So these are the open questions. This is just, I wanted to give you a kind of a sample of that what kind of thoughts the educationists or researchers in education is evolving about higher education. There are many more models are there. Some of the models I have given references, which I generally I don't do. At the end, I have given the references of the books so that if you want to access, you can study. They are interesting. You know, if you can get some free time from your profession, maybe sometime you can browse through this. Okay. So with this, I think we'll go to the next segment after this. That is the application to the engineering education. And I'll start that with actually the change in the nature of engineering education which has come also. But just keep an eye on that. Okay then? Any question?
So we can have a discussion session and then we can wait for
More discussion, sure. I thought the discussion should be along with that because we have the concept in front of you and discussion. Fine, we can have a discussion.
short one and then we can have a break before we
No, the whole question is in this section, how good are these concepts of the different dimensions and the different bipolar, points which defines the extreme states in that. How good are these concepts? Now, the concepts are different, many people have got, but still out of that, there are certain similarities in the concept. And they have found that they clearly identified some definite pedagogic implication. So that's what they have observed. Yes, please. So how will you discuss? Sure. Shoot anything.
One simple observation. Like in IIT and other colleges, some professors are there.
Mhm.
Presentation and lectures, they are not bothering about their students. They are getting a knowledge. And at the end of lecture, they went outside out of the lecture hall, and students are getting in it. They are not bothering.
See, I have been a teacher. You are absolutely right. I fully agree with you. You see, what my approach has been, I didn't know any of these things. I didn't have time to go through them. So my approach was, for any course, what we do when we give the course content, we identify the most suitable textbook and the auxiliary books which will help in that. So what I do is, we try to, and we tell people to follow primarily one textbook and supplementing it. The reason what was our thinking was that student can go to that because a textbook has been written by evolving a concept in a coherent manner. So if we are following a textbook and the student has that book available, it will be easy for him also by doing the studying and assimilating the concept. You are absolutely right that I never bothered about what the students are of which type. But one thing we are always aware, let me tell you this, that we found there's a problem. Say, in fact, informal discussion we have teachers across the institute. I told them, how many students are really you find very responsive? They will say around 25, 30, that's the percentage. And there is a large number, we are aware of the fact, that they are not responsive to our studies, to the way we are teaching. But in any case, they know how to manage to get a passing grade in the final exam. That's a different issue, So their strategies are fine, but our teaching has problems. That's why, in fact, that's the reason I thought that I must study this and try to find a framework through that we can assess the students and assess ourselves and come to a matching teaching style. Okay.
And sir, means in classes, students are in some classes students are using mobiles and laptops, and class is going on, and professors are not bothering about them what they are doing in class. So I think it should consider.
See, there is another bigger problem, which in any case I am not tackling. You see, what is happening, this is in a different context. I was studying the education system of ancient India and the present education system. You know, the student and teacher used to share the same space and same life in the ancient education system. The student comes and stays in my house, and I see him 24 hours. They did not need an exam. There was no exam system. So after he has finished, I know when he has learned. So I didn't need an exam. In fact, आप लोगों ने particularly the Brahmins, they have a thread-taking ceremony. You know that? Actually, that ceremony is not for Brahmins. It did not come originally from Brahmins. That ceremony is the starting of education. There is a guru is the teacher, and the student. They promise to share the same space. You know, there are some promises are made. They hold the hand in a particular, there are some rituals. So after that, he starts living there. But you know, when mass education came, still you know what happened, the students were sharing the same space as the teachers in the classroom. Even we had some interaction. Because students did not have, you know, anything else, much else to do. But now the present era, what has happened, that coming up with the, because of movement of technology, you know, you have got internet, you have got Facebook, you have got everything. And students are creating a space where they can keep themselves engaged. And the classes, they are coming because there is a requirement of attendance and all that. And they are unmindful of this, you know, sharing the space with the teacher in the classroom. That's why they'll do all kinds of things. Mobile mein piche kuch kar raha hai, computer mein kuch kar raha hai. Now this is the challenge. Now we cannot reverse that march of technology. But then, you know, we have to, you know, create kind of modes where we can share the same space. Incidentally, in this context, I was curious that one institute, you know, drew my attention. That's the Cambridge University. For 800 years, that has remained in the top band. So, what's the reason? How? So, in fact, we had a collaboration with some University of Cambridge teachers, and they used to come. There are many books have been written also on the teaching of Cambridge University. I asked them that, how do you conduct your teaching and all that? You know, one interesting thing he told me, and which of course is there in the books also, that their tutorial classes have strength never to exceed 4 or 5 students. And I told, my goodness, if you have got a class of 50, that means you have to have 10 tutorial classes. And that will be tremendous load on the teachers. It will, yes, we bear that load. And they also, you know, they hold many of the tutorials in hostels. They have got rooms there for studies. In those rooms they do. And his experience, he told, that students cannot remain in his shell in this kind of a small tutorial class. And he told it's so challenging for teachers. In a normal tutorial class of 20, 30 students, we need not prepare so much. But when, you know, student knows that his protection is gone, he will ask so challenging questions that teacher has to be really prepared. And so students are also coming out of his shell. So maybe why I study different things that what people are doing. This may be, you know, going to hostel and teaching has got another implication. You know, nowadays students take as if hostel is their own independent space. Earlier in our time, we didn't have anything interesting to do. So this was space for studies as well. But at this moment, so many interesting things are there to do. So you think that hostel space is mainly for enjoyment and that's nothing else. And if the teachers go and studies there, so that concept gets attacked. So I think these are some of the experiences, but we have to do something. This is a big problem. This march of technology is creating a big crisis.
You had some question. Oh, sorry. I thought students should also participate.
I wanted to ask, what's the difference between this concrete and abstract? Like, sensing is abstract.
Concrete and abstract.
Right.
You see, the main difference between concrete and abstract, some of us, we try to create the concept in our mind and then work on it, think on it, and develop our whole knowledge through that. That's an abstract way of doing things. Concrete way of doing things are, we work with the reality. It's there. It's not in my mind, it's there. So this is the concrete way of thinking and abstract way of thinking. This is the primary difference.
But either like both of them are like connected with each other, right? Unless until we see there's something there, then only we'll build upon the abstract images in our mind, right?
Sure.
So the concrete leads to abstract imaging. Is it something like that, or?
But they don't correspond. Why they don't correspond? Of course, they represent the same thing, but the abstract can have more dimensions, less dimensions, depending on how the reality appeal to that person who is used to the abstract thinking. Abstract thinking is extremely important for those people who are making models and these are abstract thinking. But those people who have to work as a field engineer, his concrete thinking is required. He must know what actually exists because he has to work on that. So this is the difference between this.
Also, one more thing, that we are dealing about the teaching style. But doesn't that
teaching I have not talked about.
Like, okay,
I'll do
the way people learn, or like how should we teach the students? Doesn't the books that are available by the authors, which are generally the professors or the teachers who make them, those books, aren't they supposed to be more towards how they're gonna, be towards the reader's point of view? Because what I see, like in maths or in any logical thinking environment, they start with theorem proves, theorem proves, theorem proves. In the end, you get the bigger picture of what has exactly happened in this chapter. Until the time either the person had that much of patience to reach the end, or that person might give up in the between also, saying ki, I cannot do this theorem proof sort of things.
Absolutely, exactly what you're telling. All the textbooks are written in a deductive style. What is deductive style? You see, all the principles, fundamentals, theories will be given, and then it will be applied to a concrete situation. That's the way books are written. And that has become our predominant style of teaching. This is called deductive teaching. Whereas the natural style of gathering knowledge by human society is inductive. We interact with we learn something, we do trial and error with that learning, and finally we understand and we then write it as a theory, the general theory. So always we learn in a particular situation. So natural, human learning style is inductive. We interact with the circumstances and we learn. But when we present it finally, is whatever the principle has come out of it, we write that in it. And what it does, what you are telling is right, that some student gets totally repulsed. Why they get repulsed? You see, suppose the matter is very complicated situation, you have got a complicated theory. Then these students start thinking, my goodness, how people could come up with this theory, this is too much. And I can't do it. So he just gives up. So that's why this deductive teaching makes different students to give up. That, this is too much for me. This kind of, how people develop. He thinks that things did develop in a deductive way and theory came and some exceptional people thought about those theories And then the inductive situation came. It happened, there's a problem that. So that I'll deal in the second part. Yes, I'll deal it.
I was only trying to respond to the student because this problem that he has expressed about the invasion of technology, laptop, mobile, I have both of them with me. They have become a part of our life,
Right,
and also the part of students' life, for whatever be the reason. So now the only way is, I think, is for us to immerse these tools in our regular teaching.
No, that's fine. You should do it. That's absolutely. But then the whole thing, what I was trying to tell, if we use these tools, you think that you assume that students will be interested because it's through a technology with which they are familiar. That's an assumption. Because what they use this technology for is for fun, for enjoyment.
Yeah.
And teaching is not fun or enjoyment. You know, one of my colleagues once said, in fact, he's a teacher here in Chemical Shankar. Shankar is a friend of mine. So one day we were just gossiping. I told teaching should be made enjoyable. He took totally a contrary. He told Subrat, you know, that teaching is always a pain in the neck. It can't be enjoyable.
It's a necessary evil.
So from his position, when I thought yes, to an extent it's right, but then you know, it's forcing them to do something which they have not learned to enjoy. So will it happen, or something more we need to do? That's the question.
There is one more thing here, response to you. It's not that I found that in my class, many times students are looking at mobile phone or laptop. In a small, I'm talking about postgraduate class. Okay, so there are 20 students or 25 students. So they are not looking, they are not sitting, and I never take attendance. Okay, so you want to come, you come. So actually I found many of them are actually referring to things on the net. And I find many times people crossing saying that, look, on this page is something different written, what you are writing on the board is different. Okay, so this is also happening. It's not just that, see what you say might be happening in a large class of 100, where you know, if there is a compulsion to attend a class, there are 20 people, 30 people sitting and playing tic-tac. Earlier, you know, see people would play tic-tac-toe, you know, in the class. So now instead of playing tic-tac-toe, you are looking at mobile phone. So, but the tool has changed. So it wasn't that it wasn't happening earlier. Okay, but the second thing is also happening. And sometimes there are two kinds of problems here. I have to be more on toes what I say in the class. Second thing is, many times on the net there are unauthenticated sources and wrong information being put. See, Wikipedia, a lot of things are not authenticated. So one has to counter even those things. But then, you know, that leads to discussions that why it is said something on the net and why I'm teaching something. So that actually helps. So there is a positive, you know, impact of that. People looking at the net and trying to counter you that, look, you are teaching something else is written on. Because now there are so many other sources of information, not just the teacher teaching on the board. Yeah?
So this is actually probably postgraduate classes you've told. That means the student has got, to an extent, got focused to, he wants to learn.
Yes.
But then, you know, what is a big problem, particularly in the initial phases of undergraduate students, they have got, you know, a transition from a supervised life to an unsupervised life. And that transition, we don't do anything to manage that transition. So, you know, in that what happens, you know, many of the focused students who were focused in their earlier school life because of the supervised environment, they become totally unfocused coming to an unsupervised life. So I think the institutes, and particularly teachers, have to evolve a little closer interaction with the students. And we have to keep an eye that those who are not able to benefit, say I'm teaching a course, I can see that some students are, you know, falling behind. maybe I should interact with them and try to understand that why they are falling behind. So a kind of an interaction space, because normally, unless the student are very bad, we don't call them. So, but those who are, because generally, particularly in IIT kind of circumstances, we get all very bright students. And when they fall behind, there is a cause of concern. And the teacher must try to understand that why is he falling behind, he is not able to follow my course, or there are other things he is giving, his priorities have changed. So a little bit, because you cannot expect a person of that age to be so mature, to be able to manage the transition by themselves. In our times, I try to, in our times, we were, the engineers had when we entered at least, when we came out with a difference, we knew that we have got a career and we have to protect I have to protect my career, and that career depends on what I learn. So there was a premium to learning to become having a good career. At this moment, there is another problem. The students are not necessarily going to pursue the career through whatever education they are receiving. What they fail to understand, I try to tell the students, that even, you are going to go to a specific profession, to a specific industry, and we cannot teach all that. What we try to do actually, we try to train your mind so that you can do technical thinking. Okay, so we give a training of the mind only, give a specific to the situation of the industry. But but then the whole problem is, they are not looking for a profession within the, technical industries. It has become so broad, the range. They may go totally to finance, may go to something. So this also we have to think how to handle it. So these are the logic I hear from the students. They say, what, I need the degree only, so I have to pass it. That's all. Beyond that, why should I study all this? I am going to do my MBA. Okay, so I need that degree, that's all. So these are the kind of things we have to evaluate. Sure.
No, when they tell me, I'm not going to work. Then all those fellows who select engineers in analytics companies, they must not be idiots. Why do they hire in large numbers engineers into these jobs? So that means your learning must be having something which helps them. So it is important. So what is it you figure out for yourself? Of course, we also have to think about that.
No, that's fine.
But
that they will agree.
Such that it can be useful in any profession.
No, that's fine. That actually I did not contest, and neither students contest. Only thing what they say, that what I will choose as my career is not yet certain. Many of them have in their mind careers beyond engineering, and so they say that, okay, after I go to my career, I will pick this up. Here only I need to pass. This is an attitude.
So what I tell them is, engineering education, whether it's chemical or civil, unimportant. Engineering 4 years is to build an engineering attitude of problem solving,
absolutely.
and the problem solving is everywhere. It doesn't matter whether you do chemical engineering and go do some selling of chocolates or something, but you still apply the engineering attitude, and that will come by doing whatever you are doing in the 4 years.
I give them a counter example. You see how important this training. You can see that after this training, so many engineers are picked up in administration, so many in banking. Why are they picking it up? At least that means your thinking has developed through this training, so that you can handle those jobs better. So why not learn? Why not assimilate these thinking methods at least? That's true.
This is another small counterpoint to it. Most of the engineers or the doctors, they are always from a higher achievement from the school level. So to that extent, they will continue to keep that band. So that also could be one of the points that needs to be looked at.
That's true. But then what happened, they were high achievers in a supervised life. That's why we must think about this, managing this transition from a supervised to an unsupervised life. We must give attention and think. I have no answer to that. We have not been able to, find a way to be able to. Many of the high achievers, they become totally, underachievers in unsupervised life. And that's a big problem.
Sir, we should look at it from percentage perspective rather than, because you are now looking at mass education, you also need to consider the percentages which are going to be outliers on both the sides.
See,
I think otherwise you will be constantly be bothered with trying to get a system which is trying to address a very small fraction.
No, actually,
I would rather look at whether we are genuinely 95% okay, rather than getting worried about a system which is only targeting towards 5% okay.
What my view will be, even the system should be able to take up and recover those 5%. Yeah, we are choosing the gems of boys, and we need them in this country. So what I'm trying to tell them that, the system should have, wherever I go to evaluate an institute, this is the first thing I ask teacher, that what are the kind of remedial strategies you have for those students who are falling behind. So I think this remedial strategy should be part of our thinking, because it's true, still in spite of the remedial strategy, some people will fall out. But we must try to recover as much and try to increase efficiency.
That remedial thing should be as a separate stream. So there is a need, you cannot confuse the overall strategy to just one particular segment. You need to look at it as a mass total, how you will look at it for the bulk mass education issue. Then there will be fallouts, there will be lower remedial thing. That you take it as a secondary exercise and then attack it separately.
Maybe both the ways you have to handle. Now the teacher, he can identify in his course that those who are falling behind. And we have got scope for personal interaction outside the classes, because generally everywhere, in fact it should be formalized, that give 1 or 2 hours that I will be available in my office for interaction. Let them come, and then you interact with them and try to understand their problem and advise them appropriately, or maybe give even handle their education a little outside also. So that kind of it. That's what I'm saying.
That is usually done, the so-called office hour. Now, I have a couple of one comment and one. One of the biggest problems that I face is that versus the discipline in the class, or discipline in learning versus ability to maintain a rapport with the student. You say mobile should not be used, and then suddenly you will see there is a certain distance which develops between you and the body of students. You raise your because somebody is sleeping or somebody is talking or so. So where do you put this line? When should I? What is beyond acceptance? And because if you become very strict, then that rapport is lost, and without rapport there is no learning. That's what that is.
You see,
this is one comment.
You see, on this, what I think is, I was extremely bothered about this clear division of space. The space of students, the space of teachers, they are becoming absolutely exclusive. And that's what bothered me, which probably I thought that, the classroom is not the only thing where you train the students. So we must evolve spaces where we can interact. In the ashram style of teaching, it's not only what subjects they teach, but the entire value system also is imparted through that outside the formal teaching. So what in fact, I have become so old, I was called for the Teachers' Day in IIT Roorkee. So in fact these thoughts I was trying to, I told, I find, I used to enjoy in Kanpur the teacher-student interaction in canteens. I valued those interactions, and also in the lawns, we have been fondly remembering. I told those are the modes we have to evolve, so that a student does not think a teacher is somebody distant. A teacher is somebody you can gossip with, you can talk with him, speak anything.
In that context only, I was saying in large classes, you always have these people who disturb, who will talk or who will sleep in the second bench and so on. So the moment you show displeasure, and then this distance, it is so difficult to maintain this closeness, certain amount of closeness between a teacher and them. Every time you try to discipline, that distance grows. That is the dichotomy. I don't want you to comment, but I have another basic problem. See, in your models that you said, the concrete sequential learners become great scholars. They are very comfortable with your learning style. They are comfortable with what is written in the books. But the creative fellows are the fellows who are intuitive and abstract kind of perceptive kind of analysis. So if you want to create inventive people, you have to break their habit of going through this concrete abstract. What is the dichotomy? What is it that you should
This question I will deal in the next section. That what kind of teaching strategy. You see, there are limitations of mass education system.
Okay.
And so only to an extent we can try to evolve strategy.
So
I'll
we'll
talk
take
about
one last question or comment from Professor Agashe, and then we will break for tea, and we'll come back and discuss the teaching part.
Sir, I'm very glad to see you. Professor Agashe, when I entered IIT Kanpur, the first seminar I attended is yours, and you were talking about linguistic hygiene. And in fact, there can be a title of a talk, linguistic hygiene. I'm coming from a normal college. I was highly amazed, and I wanted to attend it, and that's why I attended. I have been asking people, where is Professor Agashe now?
Thank you very much for remembering me after so many years. Yes, linguistic hygiene was introduced by people in general semantics,
Right.
Korzybski and others, and Samuel Hayakawa's book is what impressed me at that time. So anyway, I think we'll have a lot of chat later on. Just two short observations. These two words I don't like, style and task. Learning style and learning task. Style means what? I put on a shirt or a bush shirt, or maybe temperament or attitude would have been a better word. The second thing about task is again something which is set before the student that willy-nilly he or she has to do it. Maybe, and I think it is used, learning situation is what would be a better word. That is, we
Sir,
in
why
the
don't you
classroom.
write an article, because these are the terms. Actually, style evolved from Carl Jung.
But
He
when was
used
the
the
word
term.
introduced, learning style?
In 1920s, this term.
The
learning
earlier
style.
education is never talked about style.
Learning style evolved there, and the task and all this, they are actually
With thought.
in the area of education is going on. And I
With
thought,
the behaviorist model, task is the thing.
so
Whether it's a rat.
No, true. I fully agree with.
Okay. Now to come to this, many of the models, I think, artificially create a polarity, like sequential and non-sequential. Learning has got to be sequential in one sense at least, that you can't do something unless you know or you can do something else before. Okay, multiplication will come only after addition. That's a very crude example, but many other. So in that sense, learning, you go on learning, and your later learning is facilitated or in fact a prerequisite an earlier learning experience or whatever. Okay, so it's a sequential versus non-sequential is a rather artificial, creation of a dichotomy or a extreme.
No, what actually this is describing the learning a preference of a student. Your teaching is sequential. You will find many students are not of that type of learner. So you will find that those people are suddenly in 4 or 5 classes, you have evolved the sequence, and then you find they have learned nothing in those 4 or 5 classes. Then they are global learners. They actually, random learner is global learner. So suddenly you will find the thing has dawned on them. So it's that kind of learner. It's about, no, the teaching will be sequential.
No, not only
but-
teaching, the learning by the student also. I mean, you know, said 5 lectures and nothing shines, and then suddenly there is a. But the student has probably gone through subconsciously all that,
No,
and
actually-
only at the end of the 5th lecture he sees something in it, whereas lecture 1 is boring, lecture 2 is boring, and so on. But at the end of 5 lectures, probably the light shines,
No,
and this is where understanding takes place.
No, actually it's not like that. That's what they claim. What they say is these people actually thinks in terms of a global picture. When you teach an amount where about a picture, a kind of a global picture emerges, then only he starts responding to it. The earlier, when he sees the nuts and bolts, he's not interested. So that's the kind. Maybe, so that's the kind of learning he is actually.
Okay, the other thing is about this whether it is acquired early in education in school or it is unchangeable and things like that. To some extent, it seems to me that it's also dependent on the subject, so to speak, because I find that a student is a bundle of attitudes. You know, he does well, he or she does well in one course and not so well in another course. Of course, one can say the instructor was better or worse, but then over the years the instructors change and still you find this kind of a thing happening. So it could be even sort of deliberate that, you know, suppose I refuse to apply my mind to a certain thing, then God help you. I mean, you just can't. For example, if I come to a lecture like this and with no preparation to concentrate, to pay attention to what is being said and so on, okay, then I will not get anything from it. So, so this is the subject matter can also make a big difference. If you are attracted to something, you pay more attention and you put your heart into it or whatever. But for students, most of our subjects have no interest, unfortunately, no matter how we may try to develop.
So, you know, in this, what they are telling, that from the time your assessment has become summative over years, particularly say first year, second year, all these are summed over, then the students, you know that they may not like a subject, but they cannot ignore it totally because his performance will depend on this summative assessment. So what happens is he tries to evolve a strategy. I don't like it. So okay, my approach will be a surface approach. I want to do well. So I want to get good grades. So what should be my approach? That's why, you know, they are telling that the student will develop an approach, a strategy, and then if the strategy does not work, then he fails. So that's that.
Okay, so we'll stop the first session now and we'll have a short break. It's 11:40 now, 11:50 we can come back. 11:50 we'll come back and the next session also will be more informal and more discussion based.
Sure.
But
This is a workshop.
The teaching aspect.
The engineering teaching, some specific findings I want to present in engineering education.
We'll take the break and come.
You know, in this part,
Becoming a one-way street. That
no, in the
face separation and
no, in this part, you will find more relevant things are being talked about. It's not the concept, it's the application of the concepts. And many of the things you will become familiar with. So you respond, this is not a lecture, these slides are to discuss that whatever it keeps, you know. So absolutely, you know, I'll also tell you that the deficiencies of lecturing. So if I do this in only lecturing mode, what it implies, you'll learn that also. Now, one thing I want to point out, you know, earlier, if you see engineering education used to be what we used to call practice-based education. But then after Second World War, when scientists and engineers started working together in many of the world projects, in particularly in USA, they realized that what is the advantage of looking at engineering through science. And by that time, another interesting change has taken place in engineering. Earlier we used to have more complex engineering like civil and all that. They're extremely complex. So applying scientific principles directly was not that easy. So we have to develop a level of empirical rules and that kind of thing. But when electrical engineering came, that electrical, electronics, they are extremely close to science. So naturally, the initiative came from electrical people to have the kind of engineering education we offer today. In fact, in this, one of the prime mover of this was a person who was earlier head of electrical in MIT, Roger. His name is, I think, David Roger or something. Then he became the dean, and he started this in late 50s, 1959, 60 kind of thing. This is essentially trying to look at engineering through the prism of science. Now, that made a tremendous impact, because what science did, science gave a framework through which you can think systematically and you can innovate. So it was a great success in USA. But then first they came to IIT Kanpur to do that. What the consequences I will not discuss today, but then I discuss in regard to that. So I want to make this point that earlier the engineering used to be practice-based. It was more of inductive learning that was required. But when it became science-based, more of deductive learning is required. So earlier engineering teaching was inductive, but later it became deductive. Now, I'll go into with this only. Now, students learn, teaching and learning. Students learn in many ways by seeing and hearing, reflecting, acting, reasoning logically and intuitively, memorizing and visualizing and drawing analogies and building mathematical models steadily and in fits and starts and intuitively. Teaching methods also vary. Some lectures, others demonstrate or discuss, some focus on principles and others on applications, some emphasize memory and others understanding. The mismatches appear to exist between common learning styles of engineering students and traditional teaching styles of engineering teachers. These teachers know. This is what is a quotation of a teacher. The professors confronted by low test grades, unresponsive or hostile classes, poor attendance and dropouts know that there is something wrong. Now, for these engineering purposes, I am presenting a model. This is the only model I know of. And this has got 5 dimensions. One is perception, sensing and intuitive. We are familiar with this. Mode of input. When you are teaching, what should be the mode of input? Should it be visual or should it be auditory? I am giving lecture, and whether it should be through lecture or there should be some visuals also. Organization of input, should it be inductive or deductive? Inductive means when I teach the students, I talk about a problem, and then after talking about the problem, that in that context I come to the general principles and I demonstrate how with the use of this principle you can solve that problem. So this is the inductive style of teaching. And deductive style of teaching is normally the way textbooks are written. You write the principles and after that you go to the application. So this is the deductive method of teaching. Then mode of processing, the student how they are processing, active and reflective, and order of processing, sequential and global. How these dimensions are important, I will go more into that. The validity of these 5 learning dimensions in terms of bipolar parameters outlined above needs to be assessed in the context of our experience in engineering education. This model I am describing is an instructive model, and I would like every engineering teacher to see that in the way they are teaching. They know that how these different dimensions, how valid they are. The different learning types may be accommodated. The different learning types may be accommodated in the curriculum design and course design and teaching. How they will be done, I can. If for some learning types, mismatch in teaching creates serious problem for an individual student or a segment of students, suitable remedial strategies may have to be devised. The first dimension is perception, sensing, intuitive. Sensing learners are relatively uncomfortable with symbols than are intuitive learners. Since words are symbols, translating them into what they represent comes naturally to intuitive learners. You know, when they are reading, the intuitive learners, they can understand it clearly. Sensing learner, any symbol, because A is letters are symbols, so they have little difficulty in understanding them. Slowness in translating words puts sensing learners at a disadvantage in time test. Since they may have to read questions several times, you have seen many people, they have to read the question several times before they start answering. Before beginning to answer them, they frequently run out of time. Intuitive learners may also do poorly on time tests because of their impatience with details. If they have got a problem with all the data that are given, he'll start doing it before the details are assimilated. So which may induce them to start answering questions before they have read them thoroughly and to make careless mistakes. So time test is essentially bad for both types of learners. Most engineering courses other than laboratories emphasize concepts rather than facts and use primarily lectures and readings. Readings means words and symbols to transmit information. And so the normal teaching favors intuitive learners. This is one interesting fact. Between sensing and intuitive learners, there are further several studies show that most professors are themselves intuitive learners, while majority of engineering students are sensing learners, suggesting a serious learning teaching style mismatch in most engineering courses. Godlewski, he studied the chemical and electrical engineering courses, and he found that intuitive students almost invariably got higher grades than the sensing students. The only exception was a senior course in chemical process design and cost estimation, which is a solid sensing course. It requires all the details, as it involves facts and repetitive calculations by well-defined procedures, as opposed to many new ideas and abstract concepts. And in this course, the sensing learners could do better. Both sensing and intuitive learners are capable of becoming fine engineers, as many engineering tasks require the awareness of surroundings, attentive to details, experimental thoroughness, and practicality that are the hallmark of sensing learners. While many other tasks in engineering require the creativity, theoretical ability, and talent at inspired guesswork that characterize the intuitive learner. So we have to have both kinds of engineers. The teachers have to teach both types of learners as they perform different functions in engineering profession. Yeah.
The professors, they also come from the same pool, right?
But generally, those who go for higher studies, they have, and no, actually a taste also. The people, we have taught them all in the deductive style, all the theories. And those who get thrilled by that style, they only go to the higher education, and others, they want to run away from education, so they go to the profession straight.
See, also if you look at the last point, whatever is in red, right, you want them to go
Right, they are right. Right, that's true. No, what is happening is the right thing. That's true. But then only problem is, where the problem comes, that the teacher's learning preference influences the way they teach. That's the only problem that's happening.
Are you substituting intuition for abstraction many times?
Intuition, yes.
Intuitive logic implies something else.
I know.
I think there is a bit of a worry with respect to what abstraction actually means and intuition or intuitive logic would allude to.
You see, what intuition is meaning in this concept is those who abstract reality to their mind and they work with that.
Yeah.
And the other type is those who have the reality in the reality and they work with that. This is the only difference.
Because the word intuitive logic.
No. I know it's different. But this is the term they have used, so I can't do anything. The ways people receive information, there are, they can be divided into three categories, sometimes referred to as modalities: visual, sights, pictures, diagrams, symbols; auditory, sounds, words; kinesthetic, taste, touch, and smell. Now, this factor, of course, is not relevant for our purposes. Visual learners remember best what they see: pictures, diagrams, flowcharts, timelines, films, demonstrations. Auditory learners remember much of what they hear and more of what they hear and then say. They get a lot out of discussion, prefer verbal explanation to visual demonstration, and learn effectively by explaining things to others. When there is in group, you'll find some people, we used to do in our days, we used to form a group of students before exams, and somebody, he'll explain. And he used to learn better by explaining. He used to do better than all of us who used to listen. Most people of college age and older are visual, while most college teaching is verbal. The information presented is predominantly auditory lecturing or a visual representation of auditory information, which are words and mathematical symbols written in text and handouts on transparencies or on a chalkboard. There was a study was conducted by Socony Vacuum Oil Company, and their study concluded that students retain 10% of what they read, 26% of what they hear, 30% of what they see, 50% of what they see and hear, 70% of what they say, and 90% of what they say as they do something. So this is the kind of assimilation with respect to the input. Thus, a mix of lectures, student presentation, discussion, experiments, projects in the design of a course could lead to enhanced learning due to more effective retention. Organization of input, this I have already explained. You see, induction is the natural human learning style. On the other hand, deduction is the natural human teaching style, at least for technical subjects at the college level. So, an efficient and elegant way to organize and present material that is already understood is to begin with fundamentals and then proceed to application. And so, most engineering curricula are laid out along deductive lines, beginning with fundamentals for the beginning years to arrive at design and operation in the senior years. Individual courses follow a similar approach of principles first, applications later, if it includes application. Most engineering students view themselves as inductive learners. Half of the 46 professors surveyed identified themselves as inductive and half as deductive learners. This is a different study. Earlier it was found a little different. And when students see a perfectly ordered and concise deductive presentation of a relatively complex derivation, they tend to think that the author or instructor originally came up with the material in the same neat fashion, which they, the students, could never have done, and conclude that the course and perhaps the curriculum and the profession are beyond their abilities. Students never get to see the real evolution of knowledge, the false starts, the blind alleys, the extensive trial and error efforts that eventually lead to the elegant presentation in the book or on the board. Historically, how knowledge evolves, they don't realize. Because if they would have realized, they would have got more confidence than I can tell. So, an element of inductive teaching is necessary for the instructor to be able to diminish the students' awe and increase their realistic perceptions of problem solving. Inductive teaching approach is claimed to promote effective learning, leading to increased academic achievement, enhanced abstract reasoning skills, longer retention of information, improved ability to apply principles, confidence in problem solving abilities, and increased capability for inventive thought. So, this is what is the observation. Now, the mode of processing that input that student has, it could be active or reflective. Now, the mental process involved may belong to two categories: active experimentation or reflective observation. Now, active experimental involves doing something in the external world with the information that you have received, discussing it or explaining it or testing it in some way. Reflective observation involves examining and manipulating the information introspectively. An active learner is someone who feels more comfortable with or is better at active experimentation than reflective observation, and conversely for a reflective learner. Engineers are more likely to be active than reflective learners. Active learners do not learn much in situations that require them to be passive, such as most lecture. You know, this Mazur, that professor of physics in Harvard, he came up with a famous sentence that you don't become a football player by observing football in television. So, the passive, if you passively attend a lecture, you learn nothing out of it. So, reflective learners do not learn much in situations that provide no opportunity to think about the information being presented, such as most lectures. So, neither active learner nor reflexive learner, they learn anything by passively listening to lectures. This is essentially the message. Active learners work well in groups. Reflective learners work better by themselves or with at most one other person. Active learners tend to be experimentalists, while reflective learners tend to be theoreticians. Active learners appear to be sensing ones, as both are involved in the external world of phenomena. Reflective learners appear to be intuitive ones, as both favor the internal world of abstraction. But these categories are not independent, as the sensing one may preferentially select information available in the external world, but may process it either actively or reflectively. So, that is still, these are not exclusive category. When the situation so demand, an active learner can also be a reflective. He can handle theory. It's not that he cannot handle theory. So, this is essentially, these are some of the observations. In the context of student participation in the class, active signifies that students do something in class beyond simply listening and watching. It could be active or reflective processes involving discussion, questioning, arguing, brainstorming, or reflecting. So, the suggestion is, as we will come a little later, that in the lecture, don't make it just the lecture one-way traffic. So, in between, inject the other things. You can ask a question and then give 5 minutes, they will discuss among themselves and come up with answers. So that make them not, or take them out of their passive state. Active student participation thus encompasses the learning process of active experience and reflective observation. A class in which students are always passive is a class in which neither the active experimenter nor the reflective observer can learn effectively. Unfortunately, most engineering classes fall into this category. Both active and reflective learners are needed as engineers, which has been stressed. The reflective observer are the theoreticians, the mathematical modelers, the ones who can define the problems and propose possible solutions. The active experimenters are the ones who evaluate the ideas, design and carry out the experiments and find the solutions that work, the organizers, the decision makers. This order of processing, sequential and global. Most formal education involves presentation of material in a logically ordered progression with the pace dictated by the clock and the calendar. Some students are comfortable with this system and learn sequentially as the material is presented in a class. These are sequential learners. Another section of students learn in fits and starts, remaining lost for days or weeks, unable to solve even the simplest problems or show the most rudimentary understanding until suddenly they get it. The light bulb flashes, the jigsaw puzzle comes together, and these are global learners. When they understand the material well enough, the global learners may apply it to problems which may leave most of the sequential learners baffled. Sequential learners follow linear reasoning process when solving problems. Global learners make intuitive leaps and may be unable to explain how they came up with the solution. They may not, but they will come up with the solution. Sequential learners can work with material when they understand it partially or superficially, while global learners may have great difficulty in doing so. Global learner needs to develop a picture, a kind of a broad picture, then only they can work. Sequential learner may be strong in convergent thinking and analysis. Global learners may be better at divergent thinking and synthesis. Sequential learners learn best when material is presented in a steady progression of complexity and difficulty, while global learners sometimes do better by jumping directly to more complex and difficult material. Global learners may not do formal education since they do not learn in a steady or predictable manner, feel out of step with their fellow students, and are incapable of meeting the expectation of their teachers, eventually become discouraged with education and drop out. Losing global learner is a great loss to higher education and society, as these people are synthesizers, the multidisciplinary researchers, the system thinkers who see the connections that no one else sees and become truly outstanding engineers if they survive the education process. So these are the 5 dimensions. I have explained their implications for the students. So essentially you have to ask 5 questions on these 5 dimensions. What type of information does the student preferential perceive? Sensory, intuitive. Sensory is sight, sound, physical sensation. Intuitive is possibilities, insights and hunches. Through which sensory channel is external information most effectively perceived? Visual, that is picture, diagram, graphs, demonstrations, auditory, words and sounds. Other sensory channels like touch, taste, smell are relatively unimportant in most educational environment and will not be considered. With which organization of information is the student most comfortable? Inductive or deductive? How does the student prefer to process information? Actively through engagement in physical activity or discussion, reflectively through introspection. In what order the student progresses towards understanding? Sequentially, in continual steps, globally in large jumps, holistically. Thus, we are taking into account 5-dimensional model of teaching style in this context. Teaching. Now we have to say how to address that. We are having a class of students with the different preferences with respect to the 5 dimensions we talked about. The teaching has to accommodate all the different preferences of the learners in order to encourage students with different preferences for 5 dimensions. You know what the idea is essentially, you give your course presentation in such a way So sometimes you are catering to one kind, other time you are catering to the other kind. Both get inquisitive and then they start working on their own and learn. So that's the only strategy, because in a mass education system we can't follow just the one style, because students are having various types of learning preferences. Perception improved presentation content. Since the classes are both sensory and intuitive learners, lectures should include visual material, pictures, diagrams, sketches, process flowchart, network diagrams, and logic or information flowcharts, illustrating complex processes or algorithms. Mathematical functions should be illustrated by graphs. Films or live demonstrations of working processes should be presented whenever possible. So apart from lecture, the classes must include this for the other type of learners. Organization: to satisfy both preferences of inductive and deductive learning, an effective way to reach both groups will be to follow first induction and then deduction in classroom presentation. A statement of observable phenomena, you see what they're suggesting, that before you present a theory, you tell that these are the kind of phenomena or problems this theory will be able to tackle. So tell that, so that the inductive type of learner gets enthused. And even some of the courses, in some of the segments, when you present a theory, before that you present a problem. And after presenting the problem, then you give the theory and tell how this theory is able to tackle that. This way of presentation, which is not there in textbooks, is really increases the effectiveness, because it can enthuse the inductive learners as well. And the other implications and consequences of the inverse principle or governing rules that explain the observed phenomena may then be deduced. Some homework problems should be assigned that present phenomena and ask for the underlying rules to strengthen learning of inductive learners. And for deductive learners, develop facility with their less preferred learning mode. What they are telling, that when you give homework, you try to challenge both type of learners. For inductive learner, you give a phenomena, a problem, and you tell what are the kinds of, what theory will be able to solve it. And similarly, deductive learner, his less preferred mode is inductive. You ask him that, okay, this is the A, this is the theory. So what are the problems it will be able to? So trying to strengthen both the modes in an individual. Processing student participation. Lectures may have occasional pauses for thought, reflective and brief discussion or problem-solving activities. The active. The thought will, the reflective mode of the student will become active. So from passive state he will come to this, and problem-solving activities will give the other kind of, they will be brought to active mode, and include material that emphasizes both practical problem-solving and fundamental arts understanding. A very effective technique for reaching active learners is to have students organize themselves at their seats in groups of 3 or 4 and come up with collective answers to questions posed by the teacher periodically. When he is teaching, in between he gives a question, and then the students, they can sit in a group and they can discuss themselves and come up with that answers. Now these groups can come up with answers and it can be discussed. But suppose it probably give them 30 minutes to think, give such a problem, and then in 5 minutes all the answers can be processed and they can be discussed. And so you bring an student active phase in your teaching. So that's what is one recommendation. One such question in a lecture class will force the students to think about the course material and indicate also the material that students don't understand. One such exercise lasting no more than 5 minutes in the middle of a lecture period will create a congenial classroom environment, making the entire period a stimulating and rewarding educational experience. It will offer an opportunity to bring out most introverted students who would otherwise never participate in a full classroom discussion. Yeah.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
So, I have seen in this, if we allow
Should I go to the earlier?
the previous one, yes.
The previous.
The one where you said that. So,
Okay. Huh.
in undergraduate classes,
Hmm.
in undergraduate classes, even if I say, okay, we split our classes, so we are teaching about 55 to 60 students, and we give this question. And let's say that there is bedlam. Students are, they're not carrying out a civilized discussion. And then you scream, and you try to bring order. And then now this goes back to what Professor Ballal was pointing out, that I have lost the connect that I was trying to establish, because I've suddenly switched from, we're all trying to figure out this problem together, to the disciplinarian. But if I don't do that also, I find that it's like it's a runaway train then. So how does one ensure that this time given for discussion is optimally utilized, or
No.
doesn't degenerate?
No, what they are perceiving that in the class, say for example in this, you can make a grouping and they sit. The class is arranged that way. They are sitting in groups where they can discuss. There can be discussion within a bench. Now you give a problem which can be discussed in, let's say, 30 seconds, related to a concept, related to a teaching. You ask that question. You tell that each of these bench, the group you are sitting, you discuss amongst yourself, and in, say, 30 seconds, you have to come up with the answer, or not come up with the answer, whatever be the aim. And then you ask, what is the answer after 30 seconds? And what they are suggesting, that in a class, in 5 minutes, you will be able to come up with all the different answers, then discuss that answers, why the different they have come, you can explore a little bit. And so you have to design that problem. That problem will be thought out well, so that you don't devote much time beyond 5 minutes. Okay, so after 5 minutes, you just dispose of and come back to your teaching. This is what is perceived. Now, how you will be able to do it or not, maybe initially you will face the difficulty, but slowly I think it is doable. Your questions will be so suitable and you can do it.
Can I just enter that?
Yeah.
Actually, I have tried this several times. Right now in the summer course I am trying this. It works well, in the sense this bedlam doesn't take place in the undergraduate class. If you communicate well, it rarely takes place. If you give too much time, of course, people are uncomfortable with doing active thing in the class. They are not accustomed to it. So give them 2 minutes, 3 minutes or so, it works. I have even done 5 minutes. I will say that I will go have a glass of water and come by that time. And you can always make it a little jolly, saying that if you don't answer this question, I'm not going to pass any of you. In 5 minutes, and so on, so that you relieve a little bit of tension. It works actually.
One can try, though initially there may be difficulty, one has to handle it. Teachers always handle the difficulty.
Handling silence in the class is a problem. And so first 1 or 2, they are uncomfortable. After that, they become comfortable having their own time.
Short ones always works, but longer duration ones,
More than
even
5
if it
minutes is
engages, some students finish, they become bored. So there is also
More than 5 minutes is a problem. 1 minute, 2 minutes.
You see, now how to address the requirement of global learners in a class. Sequential learner, no problem, you are teaching sequentially, it's just with the class. Now, for global learner, you can tell that, before you starting a particular theory or something, you give him a global picture that how this theory fits into what classes the problem, what kind of applicable a kind of global perspective of what you are teaching. If you start with that, then a global learner will probably feel more at home. So he may try to follow your sequential teaching. Then the student should be the student. Then another thing what they are telling, that generally global learner, they devise their own method of solving the problem. So if the teacher enforces, many times we hear in school life I have heard, that if you have solved a particular problem by a method which the teacher has not taught you in the class, the teacher will give you 0. Don't do that. So only you see that the global learner may have solved a problem by a totally different method which has not been taught in the class. So don't discourage him, just evaluate whether the answer is correct or not. Okay. They need not be forced to adopt the teacher's strategy. Students should be exposed periodically to advanced concepts before these concepts would normally be introduced in order to inspire global learners. What is telling that for sequential learner you are going in a sequential way, but sometimes you try to give a complete picture, so maybe some of the advanced concepts which we will teach later, mention about them and little bit tell that this is the concept which I will teach later, but this will be important in this series. So that way. So global learner will now try to get a global picture of it. Then in order to encourage both global and sequential learners in the class, a teacher may assign creativity exercises with problems that allows generating alternative solution or bringing in material from other courses or discipline and encourage students who show promise in solving them. You see, normally, one thing that is a problem with the textbook is in each chapter, the problems only relate to the theories of that. Whereas normally when you have to work in the field, you need so many concepts to come. So try to give problems also involving maybe other earlier concepts that you have introduced, and so 2-3 concepts, so that this will be encourage the sequential and global learners to learn, and give them also creative freedom. Find solution in any way you like, but I want the solution, that's all. You need not do the way I have covered in the class. So this is the matching of teaching style and learning. You see, this is the dimension, this is a table, learning style and teaching style. This has to be, and in teaching dimension, what you have to do actually. You have to say perception, sensory, intuitive, concrete, abstract. You have to take care in the content of teaching, input, visual, auditory, visual, verbal. You have to take care by your mode of presentation, organization, intuitive, inductive, deductive, and then the organization of the course in that way, organization of your lectures, you have to take care of that. Processing, active, reflective, you have to do it by student participation during the lecture. Understanding, sequential, global, you have to take care of it by giving the perspective. So this is essentially, these are the kind of methods that different people that are suggesting, that this is how we can strengthen our teaching style to enthuse all the different kinds of learners that are there in the class. Okay. Then there is one more thing I'll tell about. You have to create an ambience. The students' ambience is extremely important. There are generally, the present style of education is competitive, not cooperative. So I get a better grade when others get bad grades. So this competitive style of learning, it's of course, that's there in many fields. But, this style, that you sink, I swim, I sink, you swim. This principle you can sometimes change also in some modes. Cooperative learning promotes mutual liking, better communication, high acceptance and support, as well as demonstrated by an increase in variety of thinking strategies among individuals in the group. Some amount of cooperative mode of learning has to be incorporated in a course, in a curriculum. The approach of the students will have to be changed so that it becomes second nature to them to look for a framework of thinking in order to develop further in every sphere of their interaction with outside world. Actually, in a course, what we are doing, we are giving them a framework to think in a particular area. So you try to do, your system in the institute should be such that all the approaches should be through a framework of thinking. Whether they are curricular activities, extracurricular activities, there has to be a framework thought. And the student should not be imposed with an ad hoc kind of a thing. So give always, the student should be very used that natural, normal style of operating is thinking through a framework and doing action according to that. So your system must have ambience where this is what is promoted and not ad hoc thinking. The institute has to create such ambience. The teachers are primary creators of such ambience through their ownership, flexible approach, obligations to put their own thought on the table so that excellent thoughts are made present. This is another very important thing. You know, in many engineering institutes in India, you know that unfortunately teaching is a career for us. And a career means not only by the merit of what I do in my profession, my career will advance, my career also will advance by my obedience to the seniors. Okay? So that's why many of the seniors will tell something and I don't agree with it, but I will not tell that. I don't agree because I thought that will adversely affect my career. This kind of ambition is inimical to learning, and students must not be exposed to this kind of a behavior. We must pick up, and seniors also must learn that if there is a difference in opinion, they must give serious thought to that opinion and then have a framework of taking decision. And it's not that, oh, that fellow is junior, how dare he talk in front of me. This is absolutely inimical to academics. So that kind of culture has to be set up, and that kind of ambience is important. Refusing to remain within mediocrity, psychophancy, and mundane research, however beneficial it may prove in an evolving system. So don't do this. There may be setbacks to your career. Forget it. What is there in career? The life of a student in an academic institute involves academic, curricular, academic, co-curricular, extracurricular, and daily living. In all this, students must be given a joint participation in decision making, which normally we are trying to promote. But in that, many of the places I observe, the students don't, you know, they are also career oriented, and so they will not speak up, they will listen. And teachers, the teacher members, they will discuss and they will take a decision, and student members, unless they are severely adversely affected, they will not speak up. Now, this we must see to it that in those kinds of committees where both are there, that try to get, encourage them to express themselves, their thoughts must be brought on the table. And then they must be patiently argued out without reflecting that teachers are senior partners in the whole thing. In a decision making, there is no senior partner. And often the great ideas come from those who are not used to this kind of management, because the mind moving in groups, which often happens with seniority, they are great disadvantage in innovating new decisions. And the younger people whose mind is not moving in that group, they come up with excellent idea, and that might be promoted. Students must be encouraged to understand each of the spheres of their life through framework compatible with the objectives of the institute and contribute to improve the system continuously without creating barriers of immutable scriptures of rules and regulations. See, the rules and regulations often, we find even if there is a genuine reason that the rule should be modified, there is a genuine problem is coming, we often take shelter behind the rules. Taking shelter behind the rules is the most dishonest thing in an institute that can take up. If there is a genuine problem is there, we must change the rules and learn from the student that where the problem is there. In academic courses, the student must be made to look out continuously for opportunities for the development of products and technologies wherever applicable and assign credit for them. Some of these comments have been written, in the context of a book which has come out by Eric, somebody who was earlier CEO of Google. He has written an interesting, chapter on what should be the new era engineers and what the industries expect from them. So a lot of those, and those are very interesting. I think the library should have that book. You must see that what the new kind of industries, what kind of expectation they have from us, that what kind of engineers we should be. Many more ways may be found out by the teachers to inculcate the mindset necessary to become the new era innovative engineers. This is one I have given large number of references. I want to share this with anybody who is interested, and also the references because they may find some of them, because some of the younger people are very smart. They can, get free downloads from the internet of many of the books. So look into them whenever you have time, and they're very interesting. Now let's discuss the contents of it.
Let's start with your last comment about it's an anecdote. In MIT, apparently, in undergraduate thermodynamics class, there was this one boy who used to sit in the last bench, and he failed, got very poor grades. So then the teacher was trying to understand. He attended all the classes, so what was he doing in the class? So all the students said, sir, he's a great cartoonist. He will do cartoon drawing in his class, and that's how he used to spend time. So the teacher called him and said, you bring me your notebook. And he looked at the cartoons, and many of them were related to thermodynamics. Whatever teaching, he will draw a cartoon. So the teacher told him, okay, you make me explain the concepts of thermodynamics through your cartoons, but it can't have conceptual errors, and I'll pass you. And it became a roaring book, in the sense it was so well cartooned. Some of those concepts come out very nicely. So students have different ways of expressing.
Right, true. We must tap all the new ways that the student has got, sure.
There seems to be another way of thinking about teaching, which says that it's extremely opposite to the one that you said. You have to identify in which ways people think, and you have to actually train in those ways in which they are not comfortable.
You see, that's, what I told in the initial way, initial part, I told that there are different kinds of beliefs, I should call that. I should not call them understanding, but beliefs. You see, there are some belief is, you should try to train them, train them in such a way they are able to deviate from their preferred mode. But possibly they can't deviate too much. So that's why in some of the you have seen that I told that you give the, one kind of a learner a kind of problem where his other kind of capability develops. Yes, all these have to be designed. But you can't just follow one style of teaching without making variations so that you are able to bring out all the other kind of learners. You can't totally cater to them in a joint class, but bring them out. That's the purpose. So you make him a little interested, then he'll do it, the work himself. That's the expectation. He may not, but that's the expectation. Please.
Industries demand certain kind of engineers, and they sometimes do not, or mostly when a fresher goes to industry, he faces a lot of problems. So I also faced similar problems when I was working in an industry. So engineering is a professional education. So other professional educations have doctors or chartered accountants or some other professions have internships as a necessary condition to get that degree. So why is that not a part of some internship culture is there in IITs or some other good institutes, but why is that not a necessary condition to get the engineering degree? Because that is actually required to be a good engineer, right?
See, I'll tell you, what we teach in the educational institute, as I mentioned earlier also, and by several people, that we try to teach them the framework of thinking in engineering. Because there are thousands types of industries. We cannot give training, we cannot train them for thousand types of work in the specific task. So we don't train them for specific tasks. But often what happens, the industries, when their people come, since they do only one kind of activity, they think this is the most important thing in the world, in their perception. Many a times, when we do the industry institute interaction for developing a curriculum, so you have to be extremely aware when listening to the industry people. Okay? So because their perception is terribly one-sided, there will be certain elements which you think should be accommodated, you take it up. And many industries, particularly who are there for a longer time, they know that what we train the students for in engineering. So they have, in the initial phase of the employment, a kind of period when they orient that particular person, when they employ him, towards their practices. They give them lecture and training in the shop floor and talk to them about the specific knowledge related to their engineering practices. That has to be done. You cannot straight away integrate them to the shop floor after they come out. That's not possible.
Why is it not made necessary for because that would help?
The degree is a general degree. The degree is not for, let's say, I'm a metallurgy person. We don't give degree for steel making. We give degree for general metallurgical engineering, which has got principles of steel making also. But for specific practices, the industry, steel plants all do that.
No, even, what I'm saying, that would give students more exposure to solve practical problems that you were mentioning. Because that is not necessary for many colleges outside IIT. The real problem solving exposure that.
Oh, I understand what you are telling. That's why, sometimes in the curriculum, during the design of curriculum, we suggest that incorporate some segments in the application part of the course, some segments where you can invite teachers, the people from industries and talk about it, the specific problems related to what I have taught. Okay, that is should be done. In fact, but the whole problem is, it requires a lot of effort on the part of teacher concerned. In fact, in Roorkee I tried to do it, and not with much success. That's the.
Sir, one thing I wanted to ask is, we already know something wrong with this deductive type of learning, and it's not wrong as in it's not very, the way of teaching should have been inductive to make it more, understandable to the readers if they're reading a book, or to the listeners who is attending a lecture. So why not we get into that habit of writing things as well like that? Since we now know inductive thing is going to help more to the readers, still the papers, even the research papers or the thesis, master thesis, or be it a doctoral thesis, they're all written in a way that these things were done. And most of the fallacy in the thesis, like what steps, made you hold back, what happened actually, the story is always mostly missing in those things. So why can't we take that initiative in any education institute for that matter?
No, actually I probably carried a wrong impression. What I meant was that there are one section of learners who are very comfortable with deductive learning, theory to practice. There is one section. Generally our observation is about 30% of the students in the class. There are the other 70% who are inductive kind of learners. So what we are telling, it's not that totally do away with the deductive way. So what we are telling, that you have to bring those inductive learners out who get repulsed by deductive teaching. So you present some segments in also through inductive method of teaching, that going from problem to theory rather than theory to problem. So mix both the approaches in the delivery of the course. That's what we are telling.
Thank you very much, Professor Ray. So it was thank you very much for being here. So we got a very enthusiastic response. So this is one of the first programs of this kind that we are having, and we are really happy to see the response, and hope you will continue to give this kind of response to us in future. Thank you.